You're gonna make this my fight. And I'm gonna end it.
Of all the genres that popped up last generation, third-person, over-the-shoulder, cover-based shooters were one of my least favourites. In almost all of them you played a slow, plodding character with limited inventory fighting against boring enemies within levels that all had chest-high cover in them. Games like Gears of War, Uncharted were some of the defining games of their respective hardware, and we are still feeling their influences on other games today. That's not to say there haven't been fun entries in this genre, but it was the go-to vehicle for all kinds of shovelware and celebrity vanity projects. A lot of these games use the same conventions, meaning that you can confidently say played one third-person cover shooter, played them all. That was until 2010, when legendary game dev Shinji Mikami, responsible for some of the best games, period, decided to have a go with the genre and bring us Vanquish. Vanquish is a fast-paced third-person shooter in more ways than one, and has a lot of mechanics that are unique to it. In the game, you play as Sam Gideon, an ex-college football star turned DARPA operative, touting a state-of-the-art battlesuit known as the Augmented Reaction Suit, or AR for short. After one of DARPA's head scientists is kidnapped by a Russian separatist group known as the Russian Star that have triggered a coup to take control of Russia, their first act of government was releasing a deadly pathogen in San Francisco, killing everyone and taking over a space colony. The US, not happy with this, send an assault on the colony to take down Viktor Vakistev, is it meant to be Vakistev? Who is now threatening to attack New York. Sam comes along for the ride to not only stop Victor, but also save the DARPA scientist. Bear in mind, this all happens before the game officially starts. Remember when I said this game was fast-paced? Well, even the story feels that way. Playing this game makes me feel like I'm jumping in right at the third act. And the starting mission reflects this, as you are plopped into a huge open arena with a ton of enemies and fight a mini-boss with two forms. The enemies you will be fighting will mostly be humanoid robots who are pretty cool to fight. They're crunchy and fun to explode. There are a few instances where you can blow off their limbs, causing them to lose weapons or crawl around on the floor. But your weapons are powerful enough to kill them in a few well-placed shots. The cannon fodder are sort of colour coordinated, but there are not too many. Red droids are the basic grunts and carry anything from machine guns to rocket launchers. There are occasional gold robots in the squads that function as a commander with more health. There are also sniper droids that are purple or green, I think, but I can't honestly remember. And finally, the blue droids are able to fly around the battlefield. There are also bigger robots that carry heavy ordnance like flamethrowers, rockets and drills. These require hitting a specific point in order to do decent damage. The game actually has an impressive amount of things happening on screen, especially when the game is running at 60 FPS. The amount of enemies and allies that can be on screen at once is really impressive and does give the impression that there is a huge war going on. Unlike other third-person shooters that have you and one or two allies against 7 or 8 enemies. I mean, look at these droids here, god damn! Finally, the boss variety is actually pretty good. Each are unique and varied and show off some of Mikami's pedigree. You have standard tanks and walkers, but you also have a T-1000 and something that looks like it would be right at home in a Resident Evil game. Just replace the robot parts with human limbs and you're good to go. To help Gideon deal with the onslaught of robot killing machines, his suit and weapons have a few tricks of their own. His gun, also known as the Blade, is able to transform into different guns. It looks slick in game and also answers the question of where video game pro tags keep all their weapons. You have a standard loadout of assault rifles, shotguns and rocket launchers, but there are a few novel guns. For instance, there is a close-range enemy weapon known as the LFE, which sends an orb of energy that melts away enemies. Stand in front of a big group and it will eat through them all. We also have something that I refuse to call what it's known by, and will refer to it as a head slicer, which launches a razor blade at enemies, cutting off their head before the blade flies around and smashes into another enemy. It also has a cool melee attack, which might be a cheeky reference to another third-person shooter. Each gun can be upgraded individually by finding and killing special enemies for upgrades, or picking up the same gun while having full ammo. Upgrades include increasing a gun's ammo count to how much damage it does. It may be tempting to stick to 1 or 2 guns and upgrade them as much as possible, but variety is the spice of life, and when the game offers you a rocket launcher, it usually means you're going to need it in the next section. Guns are literally everywhere, and experimenting will make the game seem less repetitive, especially when you consider every gun has its own melee attack. Now that I have covered your guns, let me tell you about your suit. The AR suit allows the player to slide around the level with the use of built-in rockets, letting the player dart from cover to cover, out of danger, and get up close and personal with enemies. It's much more than a glorified sprint, as the player is able to strafe around enemies and back away while still firing at top speed. The suit also allows for a bullet time when the player performs a variety of actions. This could be as simple as aiming after a dodge or sliding towards an enemy, drop kicking them, flying in the air, and then shooting his friends in the face. The suit can't do this indefinitely, however, as a gauge will deplete when sliding or bullet time is active, meaning the player must manage it while in combat. Letting the meter deplete fully will mean having to wait much longer for it to recharge, and in the middle of combat that is a dangerous thing. The suit also allows for a dead to rights mode when the player takes too much damage, allowing him to hopefully escape the battle to safety as time slows down even more than usual. Gideon is also able to smoke and will happily light up in the middle of a firefight. The robots are supposed to get distracted by the heat of the cigarette, but it never really works. There are a few missed opportunities in the combat that I wish were expanded on more. During various enemy attacks, you are able to counter and deal massive damage. You can only do this for a handful of enemies, and I wish there was a system like in Mikami's other works, where you could stun an enemy and then perform a context-sensitive action to them. I mean, come on, you give me an ex-hand egg player and you're telling me he's not going to kick a droid's head off into a field goal? The game is pretty short, around 4 to 5 hours, but each mission does offer a new situation or encounter to try to keep things interesting. These sequences can be hit and miss, as either being a rad encounter with a never before seen enemy, or a grading stealth section that is a glorified shooting gallery. Along for the ride with Gideon is Lieutenant Colonel Burns, a gruff army man voiced by Steve Bloom, who is packing a Gatling gun and robot arm. Gideon and him are supposed to build a relationship with each other, but they're always at each other's throats, and even after Burns is perceived dead, when he returns, Gideon doesn't really care. It's okay that Burns has no interest in being besties with Gideon, as he has Elena, a prodigy of technology and hacking skills, who works for DARPA as well. Whenever something needs opening or hacking, she's there to help you out. You also have your little squad marines to help you out in combat, some of whom have some familiar names. At times they may become too injured to fight, meaning you'll have to go revive them, whereby they will vomit up a weapon as a reward. The game keeps track of how many friendlies die, but it never really goes anywhere. The story has all these moments showing the horrors of war and how expendable soldiers are, but it never really builds to anything. This could be because the game and mechanics were made first and the story was strung together afterwards. Which brings a weird tonal shift from the rest of the speedy shooting going on. This game gets downright dark in some places, in contrast with some of the more goofy moments in the game. Instead of an over-the-top crazy action story, as what is known from Mikami's work, we have a pretty gritty and depressing narrative where there are no real good guys. Gideon tries to be the symbol of valor, but all his attempts to help are shut down, and he can't save anyone in the end. This makes Gideon a bit more of an anomaly in Platniums and Mikami's games, that usually have cheeky fun characters. Gideon is a much more cool and serious character. He'll crack the occasional joke, but he will always have a grumpy scowl and gravelly voice. Speaking of his gravelly voice, it gets really difficult to differentiate him and Burns, as they both have the same deep gravelly voice. Gideon should lay off the smokes. While the enemies, characters and gameplay are all crazy and super fun to look at, the same can't be said for the environments. With a few exceptions, everything looks the same grey floor, same grey buildings, same grey walls. This is one of the game's biggest flaws, as it does get tiring fighting in the same locales, and I would have loved to see some cool environments to fight in. We're on a big colony in the middle of space, why does everything look so boring? You eventually go to an entertainment district, but even then it's underwhelming. Come on guys, where's the neon? There's also a forest level, but this has a really obnoxious grey filter over the screen. I think it's supposed to be mist, but it just makes it harder to see, much like regular mist. There is a kind of cool section where there isn't any gravity and you rotate around the level, but it lasts all of 5 minutes. The colour palette is also needlessly washed out for my liking, especially when you compare it to other Platinum games. I mean, hey, even the collectibles are more colourful and interesting than the actual levels. While the levels themselves are needlessly boring, the backgrounds and vistas are distractingly good to look at, just making me itch to go over and explore them. The game also has a disappointing lack of unlockable content after completing the game. There are a few challenge missions, a new difficulty mode, and that's it. I mean, come on. Can't I have a few unlockable costumes or something? Vanquish feels like the middle chapter of a 15-hour game. With its start with a bang and ending on a cliffhanger, the game sold relatively well for a game that no doubt had a small budget and got positive reviews. But putting aside Platnium's licensed games, this is probably the weakest, and seeing as how Platinum fans would rather kill bad guys with melee weapons with guns being a secondary, and also the third-person cover genre losing popularity in favour of big open-world games filled with nothing. It's unlikely that Vanquish will see a sequel, which is pretty sad. The game had a lot to expand on and to explore in terms of combat and locations, and I think given another try they could nail it. Unfortunately, that may not be enough for Platinum at the moment. The last original title Platinum put out was Wonderful 101 back in 2013, and with the cancellation of Scalebound, the last half a decade has been sequels and licensed games. But if there comes a time where Gideon gets another chance, I'll be there to help him vanquish his foes.